Hi, very good afternoon. It's Gene from maverickstar Observatory. Got some really interesting stuff coming up in this video for you, so bear with me. I think it's right to do this. You know, when a few more people, you know, above average have made an effort, like they did yesterday, noticeable effort, to chip in a few bucks, you know, to keep going what we're doing here at the Observatory. You know, it's well worth a mention. So, you know, kudos to those guys. And, you know, it's great that people are starting to wake up and see what's going on. And, you know, when they come round and support a little bit or donate a bit of effort, you know, to this observatory, that you know, has to go recognised. So, you know, an amazing thank you to those guys that supported us yesterday. Okay. The video you're looking at, as you can see on the bottom right hand side, has come from NASA. But I want you to pay attention to what they've put before the word NASA. It's climate, isn't it? And what we're looking at is the Milankovitch cycle, which takes place every 100,000 years. It's this very cycle that puts our Earth in a glacial period and also into an interglacial period. And they know about it, and they know, because they've added that word climate, that it affects the climate on our Earth. So, you know, we can always run down NASA, but you know what, the bottom line, we have to just have a little bit of understanding. You know, there are very good scientists and, you know, mathematicians, earth science. I'm just trying to think of all the different subjects that NASA would be interested in, like astrophysics and things like that. There are very good people that work there, but they just can't say nothing because they will lose their job. Clearly, they're not in a position like I am, where I can talk openly about anything. You know, because the most that can happen to me is, you know, get a strike on YouTube for something or other. So, you know, we shouldn't just run them all down, because there are good people, and I believe that they want to talk, but they know if they do, they lose their job, they get ridiculed, they get pushed out, you know, their project funding gets slashed, and, you know, persecution is what we're talking about. But they know very well what's going on, because they're talking about climate, and they've also included this animation for us, which shows us a visual effect of the Milankovitch cycle, which is what's responsible for those 100,000 year cycles of interglacial and glacial periods. Now, we are going to be going through a thermocline very shortly, I know, on top of a magnetic reversal. And I just want to put, you know, the record straight so that everybody understands what's coming next. Because yes, we face a multitude now of natural solar system changes that will affect everybody on this Earth. And here's the big thing. This is the point of doing this video, is that the politicians are blindly led by the desire to wax themselves rich in, you know, what we're seeing a lot of these days, CO2 funded projects. Trust me, I know of one, and they are receiving hundreds of millions of pounds, and nothing will come of it. Clearly, we sat down, when I was talking to someone that worked for this company, we sat down and we said that you know, there are bigger and better organisations that didn't get this money, that could do a much more better job. I've got to duck and dive between the lines here, because if I start being specific about what I'm talking about, I'm going to get people in trouble. But we're talking hundreds of millions of pounds that have been given in grant money. And, you know, we both sat down, this person that works for this company, and we both sat down and said, you know what, there are bigger companies out there that could do a better job already with that money, but they never got it. And the reason why they never got it is because they've kept it small. Whoever's involved in this scam, they've kept it so small that it can duck easily under the radar, especially the public radar, because they will never know where their tax money went in this incidence. That's what we've got. That's what we're dealing with. But the big thing here is, and this is really what this video is about, is that the governments are foolishly led by the desire to put money in the pockets when the money should be invested in, other projects which could sustain a lesser impact of a disaster caused by some of these things that we are going to be going through shortly. We are about to enter a thermocline, and I just want to show you that chart that I've showed you many times so that we can clear this up. And then I want to go and talk about the Bener-Jackoff effect, which is what I was talking about the Earth. When the mass is distributed to a different location on the rotation, on a rotating body like the Earth, I want to show you what can happen, because it sets up the possibility of a rotational axis shift. This is something that, other well-known scientists have talked about the possibility in the past. They may not have spelt it out as clear as what I'm going to spell it out in this video. And, that's the difference between me being an independent scientist running this little observatory and someone working for one of the larger organisations like the European Space Agency, NASA and NOAA. I am confident that they know exactly what is going on and what are the likelihoods, but they are not in a position to, a little bit like Tucker Carlson. He made sure before he came out and started talking about the real aspects of things that people really should be switched on to, he left it right till the end of his career. But we all know what happened as soon as he started opening his mouth about that. He got kicked, but not before. He waxed himself very wealthy. We're doing things here differently. We've started off telling people right from the beginning the possibilities of what they face, and it's been a bit of a persecution for myself anyhow, with regards to the possibility of me ever working now for one of these big organisations is pretty zero, because they know, or they would say, he's trouble, he's a big mouth, can't keep his mouth shut, or something along those lines. But I think the general public have a right to know exactly what they're facing, and I treat you like adults. I know to some of you guys, when I reveal some of this stuff, it's like having that warm bedding ripped off you whilst you're asleep in your bed on a cold night. A lot of you don't want to know. So when I start talking about some of these subjects and I start laying down the facts, I understand if it's too much and you need to switch off at that point. But for those that want a heads up, they really want to know what's going on in this world, obviously they're the ones that stick around and watch the video to the end, and follow me as well. So let's have a look then at what this Milankovitch cycle that we're looking at actually does in terms of time and climate. So you can see, just before we end this little clip, if you're new to this, what we are witnessing here is a spherical orbit around the sun. During that point in time, we'll be in an interglacial period, which is a warmer period. And then when we go further out on an elliptical orbit, the Earth and the climate changes to a glacial period. The glacial period will last around about 90,000 years. The interglacial, as we have been enjoying, will last between 12 and 15,000 years. It is roughly a 100,000 year cycle, and it is like clockwork. Trust me, this cycle never shifts over millions of years, and we're going to just for that reason have a look at the chart where we can see at least 5 times over the last 450,000 years of the progressive cycles of interglacial and glacials. Let's have a look at that. So here's the record going back 450,000 years. Those peaks above the black line where the right data goes above that in temperature, you can see that we fall into interglacial periods. We're just on the back of one of those, probably 6 to 8,000 years going back into a glacial period, and at any point in time now we will feel the thermocline, which I've talked about before, which is a point in that cycle where we pass through a point where we will start to experience, almost like the flick of a switch, much colder temperatures. Now, In the video I done yesterday, I was talking about the magnetic intensities on our planet, and we're going to talk a little bit more about them in the video a bit later on, just to clarify all this, set it all up for you. But what we saw, and I've got an animation for you, is the magnetic intensity dropping off rapidly over a period of 15 years over Canada. And as a result, we have seen an acceleration in that point in time of the magnetic North Pole migrating over towards Russia. That high intensity that's increasing right now, it's stealing the magnetic pole from Canada, and it's migrating now to Russia. We know that for a fact. And I also pointed out with the evidence of other charts and animations, that what we're also noticing is that as the magnetic pole migrates, we're also noticing that the temperature is following these intensities, and it's possible that we could see the Arctic Circle incorporate around that high intensity over Russia once the intensity over Canada has dissipated to that point where that happens. What I'm saying quite clearly, and I'll spell it out, is that the climate on our Earth is also shifting in terms of where our Arctic circles lie. That is going to have devastating effects for European agricultural production. So bear that in mind. So you can see also on this chart, CO2. And it really is not worth mentioning, because it's just a load of lies. Anyone with any sense at all will pick up straight away that temperature rises before CO2 does. Not like they tell us in the mainstream media. CO2 increases and therefore causes global warming. This chart proves that wrong completely, and I could show you many temperature charts to rebut that. Trust me, CO2 does not drive our climate on this planet. The Milankovitch cycle drives the climate on our planet, and that is what is behind all these CO2 lies right now. There's the evidence, and that's the truth. And what worries me is that even these politicians and these global leaders and these criminals at the United Nations and the European Union, the unelecteds, are probably not in the full understanding of what is taking place, because they're more concentrating on waxing themselves rich and stealing money for themselves. Is that by the time this hits them in the face and they know that they've got to deal with it, it won't make no difference at all. If you pump the entire world's GDP into this, you will not stop what is about to happen. You'll be way too late to prepare in any way or form at that point in time. It'll be like these films that we see, Armageddon, a huge meteorite impact, imminently going to impact on the Earth. And, in the films, they always, manage to pull a rabbit out of the hat, and they put Bruce Willis on a rocket and send him out into space. That is fiction. That will not happen. At that point in time, it will be way too late for them to do anything or prepare for this. So we know at some point things are going to collapse. They're going to collapse beyond the point of control. And the continuity of governments that they're trying to secure will just fail. Simply because of even those people that enable the continuity of governments, like soldiers and police officers and all the other organisations that are paid by the government, the FBI, the CIA, MI6, MI5. It won't make no difference, because everybody that works for these organisations will be looking out for themselves, just like the rest of us at this point in time. You know what? It's not just the fact that we are where we are in the Milankovitch cycle that sets up the interglacial and glacial periods on our planet. It's not just the fact that we are witnessing, as a result of the magnetic poles reversing on our planet, the climate altering and shifting the Arctic circles, but we are overdue a few other things. We are overdue a massive meteorite impact. That's without a doubt. You only have to look at the moon And the only reason we can visually see all those impact craters on the moon and not see that the Earth has been hit just as many times is because there is no vegetation on the moon to erode, or weather on the moon to erode those craters. So there's the stark reminder of how hostile environment we live even in this solar system. Even though we have a giant sun at the centre of our solar system, which attracts with its huge gravity all the major meteorites and meteors, should I say, because meteorites are only meteorites because they come into the atmosphere. Meteors and comets is what I'm talking about. Our sun's gravity sucks them towards that and saves us from a lot of these collisions. But we only have to look at the moon to know that at some point in time we will run out of luck, and that is overdue. There's also something else overdue, and it wasn't only 200 years ago that this happened, and I'm talking obviously about the Carrington event that happened in the 1800s. We are overdue a coronal mass ejection off the sun, and it is just a matter of time before that erupts and is Earth facing and either glances us or hits us full on. And it will happen, trust me, it will definitely happen. These things are unavoidable. They're the huge freight train on the track that requires 4 miles to slow down before you can prevent an accident. But just the way the politicians are going, we know that this is never going to happen. There's going to be no slowing down of that huge freight train. It's going to spank straight into us. So when that CME erupts, and it will, at some point, it will hit our Earth, and then every CPU, computer chip, mobile phone, everything will get fried. Unless, it is protected. And let's face it, I've talked about this many times, they have not got a backup for every transformer that runs and distributes the power over any continent in this world. And that means the grid goes down, and if you've been doing a bit of research, you know what happens when the grid goes down, don't you? I'm sorry, that guys, that when we talk about these things, it all seems doom and gloom and we're all going to die, but that's not the case. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that these are very big inertias that when they do, and that we've proved that they do happen before, and it's just a matter of time before they happen again. When they do, things are going to change from that point on. It will be like flicking a switch. So we can do things about it. We're not helpless at this point. We can prepare for certain things ourselves, so that when the impact of these events happen, we can lessen the impact on ourselves. And when I talk about saving people's lives, and through this, the support of a few others that have helped fund this observatory, they've helped save people's lives, and more so, they have helped save people's entire life's work. When we talk about, they have taken heed of what we've said. They've moved themselves to a safer location. They've got out early, and they've prepared, in some way to avoid these catastrophes. And, in a lot of cases, we're talking about floods, droughts, the unpredictables that now occur on a regular basis. I just want to say, when we was talking about Canada, that it's going to start getting warmer, because the Arctic Circle shifting over towards Russia, and they're going to say, well, you know what, Gene, we've not noticed this. What you're saying, we've not noticed. In some parts of Canada, it's getting warmer. Well, you've got to go on a mean yearly or decadal temperature reading to get those results, to find out that what I'm saying is accurate. But what you also have to put into the equation now, which is going to counter that effect, is that we're on the fringe of going through that thermocline because of the Milankovitch cycle that sets up the interglacial and glacial periods. We're returning back into a glacial period. This chart shows it very clearly, because if you look at the right hand side, you know what comes next, don't you guys? you can see it. We dive down into a glacial period. We're already halfway, well, we're already there on the doorstep of the Thermocline if we've not started to enter it already, and then we will start to see things go cooler. So I'm sorry for that brief moment that if you thought you lived in Canada, things were going to get nice and rosy over there and warm, then it will only be short term, because if we weren't in a magnetic reversal, and we was just if we weren't in a returning back into a glacial period and we was just in a magnetic reversal, that would be the case. But because we've got the Milankovitch cycle also taking place and the return back to that thermocline where we pass that point where it starts to get noticeable cold over the northern hemisphere, then like I say, I'm really sorry about that short-lived euphoric moment for you, shall we say. Okay, let's have a look at the then let's just provide the evidence then of what I'm saying is actually happening. We'll have a quick look at the Bener-Jackoff effect, and then we'll wrap it up for the day. So let's get on with it. So you can see on this animation, down on the lower central disc, the large one at the bottom, you can see that high intensity over Canada dropping off over a short range of time. You can see the date clock there ticking away. Goes up to 2026 or 7. Okay, no, 2015 I think it is. 16. There you go. But you can see, if you look at the images, you can see how fast the pole's migrating over the northern hemisphere, and at the same time you'll notice the high intensity over Russia increasing at the same time over in the west, Canada shrinking off its intensity, and that will be what will change the positions of the Arctic Circle over the northern hemisphere. I want to quickly show you the Bener-Jackoff effect, because we're talking of the three main components over the northern hemisphere, the three main anomalies: 1, Arctic Circle and Arctic climates; 2, the magnetic poles; and 3, the rotational axis. These are the three components over the northern and southern hemispheres that are the main anomalies that take place over our northern and southern hemispheres. Let's have a look at the Bener-Jackoff effect, and that might explain how the rotational axis might begin to shift. So I'm about to show you in the next couple of seconds a clip done on the International Space Station. It was an experiment using a plasticine ball with a big iron bolt put in the back of it, and that was just to offset the balance of the rotation body in this case. And the effect that was discovered by this Russian, when it was first discovered, it was classified top secret, and the way he found out the effect was by spinning off one of the T-bolts in the, I think it was on one of the space stations. Might have been Mir, could have been the ISS, I'm not 100% sure on that, but what we're focusing on is the effect. Because if we're going to talk about possibilities of rotational axis, then something has got to change on our planet for it to go through this effect, and that could be a displacement of large quantities of ice being moved from one position to the next over the rotational point of our planet. So at the moment we know that the large body of ice, which obviously accumulates to millions of metric tons of frozen water, we know that that is movable, especially if a magnetic pole drags over the northern hemisphere that Arctic Circle, which we know is taking place. Clearly we know that the high intensity regions are the coldest regions on our planet by no coincidence. It is because the circumstances that set up that to be the case are there. But what we're focusing on just at this specific moment is the rotational possibility of an axis shift. So this is, absolutely real, this effect, and it's just a case of whether the ice shifts on our planet and therefore shifts the mass in weight to another location where the rotational axis can shift. We don't know if this has ever happened in our history, as far as I'm aware. We've never, through the archaeological findings, found that this has happened. We know that there has been mass floods over land that was, used by animals and human beings at one point, but now is under sea. We know that is a thing that has been recorded. Whether it's linked to a rotational shift, we don't know. So I'm just giving you an example here of how that can happen. Let me run the video quickly for you and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. So I'm going to start it. What you'll see is this rotational object spinning, and then it turns on its, or does a 180 degrees flip and then rotates again for a little bit, and then repeats this for as long as it's rotating. So here we go. You can see the bolt. Okay, so that gives us an example, a proven example in fact, of how certain bodies with certain masses located on that body can set up a rotational shift. Whether it is that small plasticine ball with the nut jammed in the back of it, whilst it rotates, sets up a phenomena where it goes through a 180 degrees flip, or it's the Earth. It doesn't matter. I know that these are two large, two different size masses, but they are in space. And I think that is a good example of how a rotational axis can be created. So we just need to then think of a way of moving the mass to a critical point where that Bener-Jackoff effect takes place. And of course we have come to the conclusion that if the mass of the Arctic Circle shifts, then that could set up the circumstances for the Bener-Jackoff effect to take place, because the Earth is just, as that ball is, a rotating object out in space that is subject to mass being located at a specific place. And we know that that mass can be in any form so long as it passes the critical point in weight and is on the object that is rotating, like our Earth. So there you go, guys, in a nutshell. The rotational possibility is there, and the circumstances do appear to be falling in line for that to happen. So I wouldn't be surprised if one of those three remaining, or the last remaining anomaly over our northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere hasn't shifted yet, but it certainly looks like it could at some point. Now that will, if that ever happens, that will be the thing that sends us back into the dark ages, because what that will do is redistribute the super bulge over the equator of the oceans to a new location, which will modify the continents on our planet. It's a big thing. I'm going to leave it there for you guys. I'm going to encourage a few more of you. Let's have another day like yesterday where we had a remarkable effort by just a few more people that chipped in a few bucks there. Let me just tell you what you get for that. You get an opportunity to save somebody's life. You get an opportunity to save somebody losing their entire life's work and investments. And you get a heads up of what's happening, because you're listening to someone that is obviously credible in the scientific field, has an observatory in the background there working away for us. Right, when we're talking right now, the TriMag is collecting every 3 seconds the latest position of the magnetic pole for us, and we calculate that data at the end of the month and in the middle of the month now for you guys. So, as well as covering all the other anomalies on our website, poleshiftnews.com, which you are more than welcome to go over there anytime and see that data without paying for it, as well as everybody else on this planet. And at now we've got about 20,000 people, I think it is, that go there. So we are providing a service for people, and it's not mandatory, but it is, critical for us to raise some funds in order to keep things going like we are. You get an opportunity to listen to a scientist that has no pressure put on him to talk about specific subjects in any other way. That's what you get at the end of the day, and I think that a lot of you find that worth supporting, or at least a few of you do. It would be great if a few more could jump on and support us. That's all I'm saying, guys. We live in a very strange time right now, where the people that are in power could do something that would benefit all of us. It's just the times that we live in and the level of corruption today means that is not the case, and the only thing we are left to do is fend for ourselves. That's the bottom line. There's a link down there if you want to help support me and a lot of others. And the only thing to say is that you have an amazing day. You take care of your loved ones, as always. Bye for now.